The idea for this class came about as a way to utilize the opportunity of doing a carving that I needed to complete for a commission project and turn that into a class so that y'all could accompany me on my little Hobbit Hole carving adventure. Okay, so let's take a look at what I'm actually going to be carving here. This is actually a drawer front that I'm going to carve my Hobbit Hole scene into. This is a drawer that's going to go in a Lord of the Rings themed chessboard that I'm building for a customer. And as you see, because of the shape of the drawer, I've got this long, skinny landscape format canvas that I'll be working with. And that's not necessarily the best size and shape of piece of wood for a good design composition. And so that's why for y'all's projects, which is a different design, and I don't want you to copy my designs because I want to be able to provide my customer with some level of exclusivity. So I've kind of moved some of the elements around, redrawn it, and that's where I came up with the design pattern that I'm providing for y'all for this class, which has a much better flow to the composition to it. If I didn't have the canvas size requirements of this drawer, this is much more what I would have drawn up initially. Also, because of the narrow top edge of my drawer, I'm going to be carving pretty shallow, probably only a ½ inch deep at the most. And as any time when I'm working on something that is that shallow, there's going to be a lot of recycling of the same depth. So it's a little bit less of the hard layers of where certain elements are, specific depths. So there's going to be a little bit more fudging going on with the way I'll be carving my version. Now again, if I wasn't limited by my piece of wood, ideally I would grab a 2-inch thick piece of wood and really be able to put some depth into this. Now, it's funny how things, your opinion of things change once you actually print them out in reality. I've played around with the idea of several different sizes that I would suggest to you for your carving. And initially I was thinking that a 17 by 14 size design would be the closest thing to match with my design because of the different elements would be about the same size. Well, now that I've got it printed out, the width of the door might be the same, but everything else of this size is just way too big. So it's a good thing I printed that out because I probably wouldn't have realized that otherwise. Some of the other different sizes I'd been thinking were a 10.5 inch by 12 3/4 inch size design, and I think this actually matches much better with what I'm going to be carving. So there's much more likelihood that the size tool I'll use on my carving would be the same size tool that you would use on your carving. But there's you kind of be off on your own on this carving a little bit more so than usual, just because our designs aren't going to be exactly the same. And so you'll just have to figure out what tools work best for you to be able to create whichever size version of the pattern that you choose to cut out and carve. Here is a 8-inch wide by 9 3/4 inch version of the design, and this would be the smallest that I would recommend. So anything between the 10.5 inch wide by 12 3/4 and the 8 by 9 3/4, either of those two designs or anything in between would make a really nice carving. 17 by 14, that would be a massive carving. It would be very impressive, but I think it's a little bit over large for this particular design and subject. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be using a more shallow relief type carving method for carving my drawer. Whether you choose to follow in my footsteps with that and use, say, a 1-inch thick board, well, of course, you could use a thicker board and just not as carve into it as deeply. Or whether you choose to use a 2-inch thick board and really carve in deep, 1.5 inches, 1 3/4 deep at the deepest point. That's up to you. I do have some depth suggestions for either route, and depending on the thickness of the board that you use, you will have to adjust these measurements. So let's take a look at our pattern and let's take a look at those depths. The grayscale drawing, plus it kind of helps to... Hey there, if any of this has sounded interesting to you, if you'd like to become a better wood carver, or if you'd just like to have fun carving a Hobbit hole, then you should seriously consider taking this class. As you can see, I am well into the process of carving my Hobbit hole, but the class hasn't started yet, so you've still got lots of time to sign up. Head on over to my website, www.OldOakEnterprises.com, go to the wood carving classes page, and you can sign up and purchase the class from there. I hope you'll join me on this little carving adventure.